First of all, greetings from the Singapore Hepatology Conference, and I am delighted to participate in this very important Paris Hepatology Conference meeting. And I would like to thank Professor Marsalin and the organizing committee of the PHC for inviting me to deliver this webinar. My talk will be on, is elimination of HBV realistic? And these are my disclosures. So first of all, I would like to define elimination by the WHO, which is defined as reduction to zero of the incidence of a disease or infection in a defined geographical area. And realistic by Collins Dictionary is a goal or target which one you would sensibly expect to achieve. So here's the problem. 325 million people living with hepatitis B and C globally, 257 million people living with hepatitis B with 1.34 million deaths per year in 2015. The WHO elimination target is a reduction of 65% in deaths from chronic hepatitis B and C, which means we are reducing it from 1.34 million in 2015 to 490,000 in 2030. And for new cases of chronic hepatitis B and C, the WHO expects us to achieve a 90% reduction in new cases from 8 million to 800,000. Very ambitious indeed. So these impact targets are consistent of scaling up with 6 key service delivery interventions. First of all, there is hepatitis B vaccination, and we need to cover from 84% to 90% over this 15-year period, which is, I think, an achievable target. The hepatitis B vaccine birth dose coverage is, however, more challenging. We need to go from 39% to 90%. Testing services for hepatitis B infected patients is even more challenging. We need to go from 9% in 2015 to a target of 90% by 2030. And for treatment, from 8% to 80% in 2030. So how are we going to achieve this? First of all, the WHO has set out a framework by which we will take action, and this sort of slide is familiar to most people, looking at strategic direction 1, information for focus action, strategic direction 2, interventions for impact, strategic direction 3, delivering the equity, followed by strategic direction 4, financing for sustainability, and strategic direction 5, innovation for acceleration. One of the key aspects of this framework is the continuum of viral hepatitis services and the retention cascade, or the continuum of care cascade, as is commonly known. And we can see that every step along the way, there's a reduction in the number of patients that are being retained in care, all the way from prevention, testing, linkage to care, treatment, and chronic care. And how does this pan out in reality? So this is the modeling study done by WHO for the Western Pacific region, which has the region for the largest population of hepatitis B infected patients. And we start off with about 115 million infected patients, but we can see that in this modeling study, only 17% of patients were diagnosed with chronic hepatitis B. And of these, only 3.5% of patients living with hepatitis B received treatment, and even fewer were virally suppressed. So it is a very challenging situation indeed. When we look at the countries that are accounting for 80% of hepatitis B, I've listed the top 5 countries in the general population here. It's no surprise that China by far has the largest population, followed by India, Nigeria, Indonesia, and the Philippines. Now, children less than 5 years old were the largest population of chronic hepatitis B patients. However, it's a different story because this reflects patients who basically are in countries where the rollout of the vaccine has not been as efficient. And these countries are a different population. India is common to both of them, but Nigeria, Indonesia, Congo, and Ethiopia are the main 5 countries involved. And when we look at global hepatitis B perinatal prophylaxis in 2016, the 3-dose vaccine target is actually quite close to being achieved globally. The 2013 target of 90% is almost there, but the timely birth dose of having the first injection within 24 hours is far from being achieved, where the global average is below 50% and the 2030 target is 80%. So we have a long way to go. And the culprits here are Afro region and the EMBRO region, the Regional Office for Africa, and the Eastern Mediterranean Regional Office. WHO Good Clinical Practice Guidelines for Simplified Delivery is a mechanism by which we can hope to achieve this. Simple and standard algorithms, decentralized testing, integration of hepatitis B testing, care, and treatment with other services, task shifting to support decentralized care, strengthening the linkage from testing to care, engagement with the community, and efficient procurement and supply management of quality medicines and diagnostics. And finally, data systems to monitor the quality of care and coverage. An adoption of a simplified and standardized algorithm for hepatitis B is really quite crucial. And in this schema, the first thing we need to do is test for surface antigen, which is widely available to this day. Then the assessment of the stage of chronic liver disease using non-invasive testing, nucleic acid testing, to define whether these populations have cirrhosis, in which case antiviral therapy would be initiated immediately, or no cirrhosis, in which case treatment could be deferred for monitoring, and monitored for these outcomes. Next, we would need to look for monitoring of the patients for detection of HCC and treatment response, and finally, for evidence of toxicity or adverse events. While current therapy is good at control of therapy using nucleoside analogs, we're far from achieving a cure. And we can see that there's a lot of activity in terms of trying to achieve functional cure, but we are still some way from achieving this. So when we look at where we are now, progress on global elimination targets, we can see from these red arrows that the prevention of mother-to-child transmission, we're still a long way to go. We are at around 40%. We need to reach 90%. Harm reduction, we're at 10%, and we need to reach close to 100%. HPV diagnosis, as I've shown you before, we're below 10%, and we need to reach 90%. And HPV treatment, we're at 8%, and we need to reach 80%. So when we look at the modeling studies of global interventions against hepatitis B, this modeling study, which was published a few years ago in The Lancet, it's a slightly complicated slide, but let me take you through this. So in red here are the WHO targets, and you can see here in the red vertical line is the 2030 target for that WHO hopes to achieve. And we want to reach 800K. The first one is new age for HPV cases. And we can see for each of these graphs, we have cumulative strategies that will reduce the new cases over this period of time, starting with the status quo, which means that we're unlikely to hit the WHO targets if we continue the same treatment. And in the most optimal situation, we have infant vaccination at 90%, birth dose at 80%, peripartum therapy at 80%, and antiviral therapy at 80%, in which case we would just meet the WHO target of reducing new HPV cases to 800K. And we can see on the right-hand the time to elimination of new HPV cases. In yellow is what would happen is the status quo, and in blue if we have the maximum intervention. But there's no way we're going to achieve elimination by the 2030 target. When we look at the bottom panels of HPV deaths, we can see here that the most important strategy to reduce this is chronic hepatitis B therapy. And in that setting, infant vaccination 90%, birth dose 80%, peripartum therapy of 80%, and treatment of 80%, plus a cure would lead us to achieve the WHO target of below 490,000 deaths by 2030. But as I've said, we are a long way from achieving that. And we look at the countries that can achieve that within that timeline. Only North America and Western Europe were likely to achieve that. But for every other country in the world or every other region in the world, we're unlikely to achieve that. So to conclude, that the WHO elimination targets for 2030 are ambitious, and but they have laid a template by which this could be achieved. The main barriers to achieving this goal are preventing mother-to-child transmission, and we need to reach 90% to do that. Improving HPV diagnosis, and we need to move from 10% to 90%. Improving HPV therapy from below 10% to more than 80%. Modeling suggests that this can only be achieved if service delivery is maximized, and the HPV elimination as a realistic goal, but not in the 2030 timeframe set by WHO. Thank you very much for your attention, and once again, greetings from the Singapore Hepatology Conference.